Chilling Night Ride, 3 Terrifying Tales from the Darkness. Part 2. Get ready for a spine-tingling experience with 3 gripping stories. In the Black Rain, a stormy night drive turns nightmarish. The Cursed Taxi takes you on a supernatural ride, and the Midnight Hiker encounters the unexpected in a dark forest. Brace yourselves for these thrilling tales, night drive horror stories, an unforgettable experience you won't want to miss. The Black Rain. The night was thick with storm, a tempest born of nightmares. John's battered sedan fought against the wind and rain as he navigated a desolate country road. The world outside was swallowed by darkness, and the relentless downpour pelted his windshield like shards of obsidian. Desperation gnawed at him. He'd taken a detour to avoid a highway pileup caused by the storm, but now he found himself lost in an eerie solitude. The rain intensified, taking on a sinister shade of black that seemed to drain all light from the world. John's heart quickened as he glanced at his fuel gauge. The needle hovered just above E. Panic gripped him. He pressed on, the wipers battling the inky deluge to provide momentary glimpses of the road. The surroundings had transformed into a surreal nightmare. Trees twisted like tortured souls, their branches reaching out to grasp at his car. Shadows danced in the periphery of his vision, shapes that shouldn't exist. As he rounded a bend, John saw a dim, flickering light ahead. It was the only sign of life he'd encountered for hours. His hope soared, and he accelerated toward it. The light belonged to an old, weather-beaten gas station, its neon sign stuttering in the rain. "Last stop," it read, a grim irony that sent shivers down his spine. John pulled up to the pumps and staggered out of his car, drenched to the bone. He grabbed the nozzle and began to fill his tank, but the gasoline flowing into the tank was as black as the rain, a viscous, unnatural fluid that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Fear and confusion twisted in his gut. He glanced around, noticing that the gas station was eerily deserted. No attendant, no other customers, just the relentless downpour and the faint hum of the flickering neon sign. John's mind reeled. He needed to get out of this nightmare, to escape this place. As he returned the nozzle and climbed back into his car, a cold realization settled over him like a death shroud. The rain, the gas, the twisted world around him. It was all connected to his deepest fears, his darkest secrets. He couldn't escape because he was the source of this horror. With trembling hands, John restarted the engine and pulled away from the gas station, but the road seemed to stretch endlessly into the abyss. He was trapped in his own personal hell, where his fears had taken on a tangible form. The rain intensified, pounding his car as if the heavens themselves were trying to cleanse the world of his presence. Shadows and specters danced at the edge of his vision, whispering his sins and regrets. He couldn't escape the truth that had haunted him for so long. And then, just when he thought he could take no more, the rain ceased, the road ahead clearing. He found himself on the edge of a cliff overlooking a bottomless abyss. With nowhere left to go, John stepped out of his car and approached the precipice. As he gazed into the darkness, he saw the faces of all those he had wronged, all the pain he had caused reflected in the void. And then he saw himself, hollow, remorseful, and irrevocably changed. With a terrible understanding, John stepped off the cliff, disappearing into the abyss, his own worst fear realized. The black rain continued to fall, erasing all traces of his existence, leaving behind only a chilling sense of unease and a world forever altered. The night swallowed him whole, and the nightmare lived on. The Cursed Taxi. The city was cloaked in a blanket of relentless rain, casting a monochromatic pallor over everything. Jack sat in his taxi, his weary face illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard. It had been a grueling night, and there was no sign that the rain would ease up anytime soon. Just as he was contemplating calling it a night, a figure materialized at the curb. It was a woman, soaked from head to toe, her features obscured by the hood of her coat. She wordlessly opened the rear door and slid into the back seat. Jack thought nothing of it. He had picked up countless passengers who didn't exchange a single word.
Where should it go?
Jack inquired, stealing a glance at her through the rearview mirror. Her eyes, like dark voids in the dimly lit cab, briefly met his before she turned her attention to the rain-drenched window.
Take me to Elm Street,
She finally uttered, her voice a gentle whisper that sent a shiver down Jack's spine. Among taxi drivers, Elm Street was infamous, a place where peculiar occurrences were rumored to transpire. Jack hesitated for a moment but ultimately nodded, pulling away from the curb. The journey began in silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic pattering of rain on the cab's roof. As they navigated the city, an unsettling feeling crept over Jack about his passenger. She seemed to radiate an aura of darkness, and her presence weighed heavily on him. Attempting to break the silence, he ventured,
What brings you to Elm Street on a night like this?
The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, but her gaze remained fixed on the rain-smeared window.
I have a tale to share, driver. A tale that commences and concludes on Elm Street.
Jack furrowed his brow, but opted to indulge her. Over the years, he had heard plenty of peculiar stories from passengers.
I am listening.
And so the woman began to speak. Her words wove a hypnotic spell, drawing Jack deep into her narrative. She recounted a tale of a cursed house on Elm Street, a place where countless souls had met their demise. Her description of the tormented spirits that haunted its halls, their anguished cries reverberating through the night, sent chills down Jack's spine. As her story unfurled, Jack's grip on the steering wheel tightened. He couldn't help but steal glances at her through the rearview mirror, his unease escalating with each passing moment. The rain appeared to intensify, as if the very heavens wept for the horrors she recounted.
And now, we're nearly there,
the woman said, her voice dripping with malevolence. Jack's heart raced as he turned onto Elm Street, a rain-slicked thoroughfare winding through a grove of gnarled trees. The house she had described loomed into view, its decrepit facade bathed in an eerie greenish glow. He pulled up in front of it, his hands trembling.
I'm getting off here,
the woman declared, opening the door and stepping out into the rain. She turned to face him, her eyes no longer voids but twin orbs of burning crimson.
Thank you for the ride, Jack. You've been an exceptionally accommodating driver.
Before he could react, she vanished into the night, leaving Jack alone with the cursed house. Panic overwhelmed him, and he sped away from Elm Street, the image of her crimson eyes seared into his mind. Days turned into weeks, but Jack couldn't shake the memory of that fateful night. Whispers echoed in the shadows, voices recounting unspeakable horrors. Sleep eluded him, and his once steady hands trembled with fear. Then, one fateful night, as he drove past Elm Street, he spotted her standing on the sidewalk, the woman with the crimson eyes. She raised a hand and beckoned him to stop. Unable to resist, Jack pulled over. As she entered the cab, she leaned in close, her breath cold against his ear.
It's time to continue the story, Jack,
she whispered. And as she began to speak, Jack realized that he was trapped in an unending nightmare, a passenger in a taxi that had become his own personal hell. The rain fell relentlessly, washing away his sanity, as the cursed fare resumed her tale, each word propelling him further into madness. And so the taxi became a vessel for his torment, eternally circling Elm Street, a cursed soul at the mercy of the woman with the crimson eyes. The Midnight Hiker. The young woman named Sarah yearned for a moment of solitude and self-discovery. On this eerie night, she decided to embark on a solo night drive through a dense, foreboding forest in the hopes of finding answers to the questions gnawing at her soul. The thick trees loomed ominously over the road, and the path ahead disappeared into darkness. Sarah's headlights cast eerie shadows on the trees as she ventured deeper into the woods. But then, the unforeseeable happened. Her car sputtered and lurched to a sudden halt, the engine whining before falling silent. Sarah muttered curses under her breath and attempted to restart the engine, but all her efforts were in vain. Stranded in the darkness, far from civilization, she had no hope of help. As Sarah pondered her hopeless situation, she suddenly heard footsteps approaching on the forest path. Someone was drawing near. She watched as a man emerged from the shadows. He was clad in outdoor attire, carrying a backpack.
Hey, do you need some help?
The man called out in a friendly tone. Relief washed over Sarah at the sight of another human being.
Yes, my car broke down. Can you help me?
The man introduced himself as Jimmy and offered to assist her in finding help. He also promised to return later to fix her car. Sarah agreed, and together they ventured into the gloomy forest. As they walked through the darkness, Sarah began to feel increasingly uneasy about Jimmy. Something didn't seem right. He spoke little about himself and seemed more interested in prying information from Sarah. His questions became more personal and unsettling. Suddenly, Sarah noticed something odd. They had passed the same spot 3 times already. The forest path seemed to be looping in circles. Panic welled up within her, and she scrutinized her surroundings more closely. The forest appeared to be morphing, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes and the darkness closing in.
Jimmy, what's going on? Why are we going in circles?
She asked, her voice quivering. Jimmy smiled in a disconcerting manner.
Oh, it's just a minor detour. Don't worry, we'll find help soon.
But Sarah couldn't shake the fear gnawing at her insides. She sensed that something was terribly wrong. She desperately tried to retrace her steps, but no matter which direction they took, they ended up back in the same eerie spot. As the night wore on, Jimmy's demeanor grew increasingly sinister. His smiles turned into menacing grins, and his voice took on an otherworldly quality. Sarah was trapped in a nightmarish maze with no way out. Just when she thought all hope was lost, the forest seemed to come alive. The trees writhed and groaned, their branches stretching out like grotesque limbs. Sarah realized that the forest itself was conspiring against her. In a final act of desperation, she screamed, and the forest echoed with her cries. Suddenly, a blinding light pierced the darkness, and the forest twisted and contorted before her eyes. When the light faded, Sarah found herself back in her car on the deserted forest road, the engine purring to life. Confusion and relief washed over her, but as she looked in her rear-view mirror, she saw Jimmy's sinister grin reflected in the darkness. He had never left the car. The forest had been an illusion, a malevolent force that had ensnared her, and now she was driving down the same road with Jimmy, the true nature of her terrifying ordeal still shrouded in mystery. Which of the stories touch you the most? Write it in the comments below the video. If you want scary stories regularly, don't forget hit the like and subscribe button, and turn on the bell, if you dare.